All right, good evening, everyone. It is 6:30, so we will go ahead and call the meeting to order. Mr. Cusick, if you'll please perform roll call.
Mrs. Best.
Present.
Mrs. Davis.
Present.
Mrs. Epling-Skinner.
Present.
Ms. Harless.
Present.
Mrs. Hudson.
Present. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for tonight's meeting. My name is Nikki Hudson. I have the privilege of serving as this year's board president. To my far left is Board Vice President Kelly Davis, Board Member Amber Epling-Skinner, our Treasurer TJ Cusick. To my immediate right, Dr. Bowers, our Superintendent, Board Member Stephanie Harless, and Board Member Jennifer Best. If you'll please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May I please have a motion to approve our agenda tonight? I don't believe there have been any changes since published.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Would you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Epling-Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes. Motion carries. And that brings us to a very exciting portion of our evening. May I please have a recommendation, may I please have a motion to recognize Toya Spencer on being named the 2024 Exemplary School Employee by the OSBA Central Region, and Allie Minister for being named the 2024 Gary Smith Compassionate Teacher Award winner.
So moved.
Second. I was going to say, we can take that as a first and a second. Would you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Epling-Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Wonderful. Motion carries. And tonight we have with us State Senator Stephanie Kunze, who's going to join us for the recognition. I guess I should say is going to lead the recognition.
Well, I will do whatever you want me to do. I can call up Toya Spencer first, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Toya, if you want to join me up here, wherever. Yes, over here, second. I just want to thank you so much for the excellence in education that you're bringing to students within the Worthington School District. And it's not a small thing for OASBO to name you the exemplary school employee for 2024. And so I just want to say on behalf of the Ohio Senate, to have great school districts like this, especially in my district, it's just a real honor for me to be able to be here and congratulate you on behalf of the Ohio Senate and present you with this Senate commendation. So thank you for all of your work and all of the investment you're making in our children. And then I'd also like to call up Allie Minister for her outstanding achievement and the 2024 Gary Smith Compassionate Teacher Award. It's kind of awkward to talk into this at the same time, but I am a former elementary school secretary in the Hilliard City School District, and I can tell you that having exemplary teachers and compassionate teachers is really what this is all about. Your work as the board and as the superintendent and all of the great staff that you have, really what it comes down to is making children feel like they are wanted, they're worthy. Your tagline is, it's worth it. And I couldn't be more proud today to be here and grateful to honor Allie Minister for being such a compassionate teacher and bring her a Senate commendation as well on behalf of the State Senate to thank her and all of you for the work that you do each day to encourage and to lift up children. Thank you.
Senator Kunze, thank you very much for joining us this evening and recognizing Toya and Allie and their amazing accomplishments. Truly appreciate it. That brings us to the visitors' comment portion of our meeting. I'm going to read just some reminders here so that we're all on the same page. The school board and administrative staff encourage and appreciate community interest in meetings of the Board of Education. This section of the agenda is designed to hear the views of community members about their schools and items on the agenda. Each speaker will be asked to address the board at the visitor's podium so that the speaker's remarks may be clearly heard, and the speaker should give their name and street address and limit comments to, limit comments to 5 minutes. Consistent with our policy 9130 on public complaints, we ask that complaints about particular employees be referred to the superintendent and not addressed during public session. We remind all speakers that our district values and respects all people as they are, and that our district is committed to creating and maintaining safe spaces for all of our students and community members. We appreciate when our community members remember our district's values, refraining from using harmful or offensive language, and for sharing your comments in a civil and respectful manner. And I would just remind everyone that it is not our usual practice to respond to remarks during the visitor comment section of the meeting. And with All right, that concludes the visitor comment portion of our meeting and brings us to section C, information and proposals. Very excited as Rob Messenheimer, Director of Elementary Education, is going to be presenting tonight information about kindergarten programming and a recommendation for exploring universal all-day kindergarten. Good evening, Rob.
All right, thank you. Good evening. Just want to start by thanking the board for number one, an opportunity to share about our kindergarten programming here in Worthington, and then also for engaging in discussion around landing on a model that might best serve our students and our families into the future here in Worthington. So excited to be in front of you and excited to share about kindergarten. Tonight, our recommendation that we're bringing forward is that the board consider a change of our kindergarten model to a universal, no-cost, all-day kindergarten model. This evening, I hope to be able to share information with you about our current programming, but also talk about driving factors that are really bringing this discussion to the table this evening. So on the screen, you see 4 components there that we consider to be driving factors of this discussion. First up there, and we'll go in more depth, but is program access and equity. So as you all know, we do have a tuition-based all-day kindergarten model here in Worthington. For many of our families, that serves as a barrier to access that increased instructional time. So that's something that we'll talk about this evening. We'll talk about demand for both the half-day programming and the full-day programming. So we'll look at some enrollment numbers and just data really over the past decade and what that demand here in Worthington for different kindergarten programming has looked like. We'll spend some time talking about instructional recommendations. In particular, we'll look at reading and some legislation that's occurred here in Ohio recently and how that impacts instruction and the amount of time and exposure that students have in our classrooms in kindergarten here in Worthington. And then lastly, we'll also look around the landscape of kindergarten programming in Central Ohio so that you get a sense of what do other districts that are surrounding us, what does their kindergarten programming look like, what does access look like to that programming, and what do their models look like to best serve their kindergarten students. So as a starting point, just an overview of what our current kindergarten model looks like. So in Worthington, we offer families a choice of both half-day and all-day kindergarten. So as the names imply, the biggest differentiating factor there is the amount of instructional time that students get while in the classroom. So our full-day classroom, the instructional day is 6 hours and 40 minutes long, and our half-day program is 2 hours and 50 minutes long. So some differences between those programs. Both students obviously get instructional time. They both participate in related arts for all-day kindergarten. So that would be things like art, music, wellness, library. That time is a little bit longer, about 15 minutes longer in the all-day setting. All-day students also participate in midday recess and lunch as well. So when you take out lunch and you take out related arts, that instructional time in the all-day setting is really roughly double what students get in that half-day program. We currently ask families to pay a tuition in order to be part of all-day kindergarten. So that cost is $345 a month. So when you look at that over the course of the year, that equates to $3,105 per student to participate in all-day kindergarten. I would want to note that we do waive kindergarten tuition for families that meet the requirements for free and reduced lunch. So that's a federal program. And if household income falls below those federally established thresholds, then we waive tuition. So in Worthington, if you meet that free or reduced threshold, then you pay no tuition for all-day kindergarten. So this year, when we look at our numbers, that's about 33% of our student population in all-day kindergarten that does not pay tuition to access that all-day programming. At the bottom there, so we already noted that families have a choice. So in all 11 of our elementaries, we offer both all-day kindergarten and half-day kindergarten. So traditionally, that's been what we call standalone programming. So we have classrooms that are just full-day kindergarten, and then we have separate classrooms that are just half-day kindergarten. This year, we've had to re-envision that a little bit due to enrollment. So at several of our sites, we had extremely low enrollment and interest in half-day programming. So at 4 of our schools this year, we're running what we call a push-in model. And what that means is simply that students at those sites where we did not have enough students to run a full section of half-day kindergarten, those students join the full-day sections, and then they leave at the pre-established time where other half-days at other schools would leave in that morning programming. So a couple things to think about there. Our teachers have done a fantastic job in accommodating that this year. However, I would say that it's been a lift in some ways for those teachers because we really had to reorganize what that instructional day looks like. So it does have somewhat of an impact on the organization of that classroom and how curriculum is delivered in those rooms. We're going to take a look at the landscape across Central Ohio here. So board members, I think you have this in front of you too to be able to look at in a little bit more detail. But these are districts across Central Ohio, and in the first column there, anything with a green check denotes a school district that offers an all-day kindergarten program. So what you're going to see up there is you see Dublin currently does not, and you see Olentangy does not offer an all-day program. Dublin, note the asterisk next to it. Next year, they are moving to a universal all-day program in Dublin. So starting with the 25-26 school year, really Olentangy will be the only district that doesn't offer a full-day option. I don't want to speak for Olentangy. It's more of a half-time model. So students in Olentangy go on an alternating day schedule. They're sort of driven by their increasing enrollment that seems to be constant in Olentangy, and then that creates space constraints too. In the next column, it denotes the cost for all-day kindergarten at different districts. So anything with a green check means that they offer a tuition-free all-day program in those districts. So you'll note that New Albany, Westerville, and Worthington are all tuition-based for all-day. The costs are denoted up there on the screen. Westerville does offer a sliding scale, so based on household income and number of students that they have, sort of drives what families pay for all-day kindergarten in Westerville. And then in the last column, it's titled Half Day. What that really is indicating is, do they offer a standalone half-day program? So do they have an option where families can choose and participate in half-day in a classroom that's just half-day students? So you'll note up there that it's only the districts that charge a tuition or do not offer an all-day program that currently have half-day standalone classrooms. When we consider half-day, so the question has come up, what happens in other districts if a family would like to participate in half-day kindergarten? So under Ohio Revised Code, districts do need to allow families to participate in the minimum number of required hours. So in Ohio, that's 455 hours of kindergarten. Other districts have just moved to an all-day kindergarten model. If they have families that would like to participate on a half-time basis, they welcome them into those full-day classrooms, but we're not necessarily giving the full breadth of curriculum during that time. So in other words, not reorganizing their program around those few students that might be joining. As we've talked to other districts, we have learned that there really is not a demand that's out there. So a number of districts have noted that they have no students participating or requesting to participate in half-day kindergarten. This graphic speaks really to demand for different kindergarten programs here in Worthington. So these numbers are from the first day of school over the course of the last 10 years here in Worthington. And the percentages show the percent of families that have chosen half-day kindergarten over the years. So you'll notice in 2018 was our peak in the last 10 years. So 44% of our families chose half-day kindergarten in 2018. This year, at the start of this school year, we had just under 16% of our families choose half-day kindergarten here in Worthington. I'd like to also just speak, as we worked with families last spring when we recognized that we had lower than typical enrollment in half-day programming, it gave us an opportunity to really get to know some of our half-day families and their situations. So I'd just like to point out too that enrollment, that 16% is really created of families that prefer that half-day setting, and that's what works best for their family. And it's also created of some families that have expressed that they would prefer to be in the all-day setting, but that tuition was outside of their family budget. So then they've opted for half-day kindergarten because the pricing of the tuition put that outside of what they felt like they could afford for their family, and they don't qualify for the free and reduced program. So as we started this school year, this is a look at numbers as we sat on the first day of school here in Worthington. So you will notice that we had a number of schools that had very low enrollment in half-day kindergarten. So anything on the screen that's denoted in green represents a class that's less than half full of what we would say a full class is. So in Worthington, we have an informal classroom cap in grades K through 3 of 26 students. So anything on the screen that's denoted in green is under that number of 13 that would represent a half-full classroom. So just wanted to provide a picture of what the start of the school year looked like here in Worthington. We have had some movement in those numbers as we've gotten into the school year. I think the start of the school year is probably the most accurate representation of what families are really choosing here in Worthington. As we enter the school year, we do have full-day programs that fill up, and then families, in order to stay at their home school, do opt for half-day kindergarten. So we do have 4 schools right now where we're totally full and full-day kindergarten, and so half-day really presents as the only options in those sites. Perhaps most importantly is just considering what's the impact of on instruction in a half-day setting versus a full-day setting. So in Worthington, we've always valued instructing and developing the whole child. So we think academically, building social skills in the school setting, and supporting kids emotionally too. And quite simply, increased time in our classrooms and around peers provides us that opportunity for teachers to work more closely with students and for students to have the ability to interact with their peers more and more regularly as well. In particular with reading, Ohio recently passed House Bill 33. So one of the requirements with House Bill 33 is that every school district in Ohio must adopt a curriculum in English language arts that aligns with the science of reading. So science of reading, again, just in a nutshell, is just the most current research on how students learn to read and develop language. So Ohio Department of Education and Workforce has put out an approved list of curriculums, and every school district in Ohio must adopt a curriculum that aligns to that list. So in Worthington, we're piloting 2 different curriculums that align with science of reading and approved curriculums from the state. Both of those curriculums come with recommendations at the K through 2 level for 120 minutes of daily ELA instruction. So when you really look at our half-day time that we have 2 hours and 50 minutes. 30 minutes of that is related arts. So when you take that away, we're left with very little time in that day, and it's really not realistic or feasible to expect to be able to meet that recommendation of 120 minutes of ELA instruction during the course of the day. Other factors to consider is opportunity to provide students intervention in the school setting. So we believe that that increased time in the all-day setting allows us to better serve kids and better provide that level of intervention as well. Operationally, there certainly is a cost that comes with instituting universal all-day kindergarten. So one of those is when we look at staffing, we would have a need to increase our staffing. So we anticipate that being 3.5 to 4.5 full-time employees. So that would come from transitioning current half-day kindergarten teachers into full-day spots. And then we would have a need to fill some additional classrooms with teachers as well in order to move to a universal all-day kindergarten model. Busing is another element that we've considered. So in talking to Tracy West, our transportation director, Tracy indicates that there would be a positive that as we moved away from half-day kindergarten midday routes, that would provide us an opportunity to shorten some of our Sutter Park routes. So many students at Sutter Park, they're our youngest students, first of all, so time on the bus sometimes can be difficult. And we have students with significant needs at Sutter Park as well, so the opportunity to shorten some of those routes we would definitely look at as a benefit as well. And then lastly, space and availability. So I've had the opportunity to work with every principal and tour every elementary, and we feel confident that with our current enrollment that we would have space availability that we would need in order to move to an all-day model. And then lastly, budget considerations. So Treasurer Cusick has provided us with estimates on what we believe the cost would be to move to this model. So we would be moving away from a tuition-based model, so that we would lose about $1.4 million that we currently bring in revenue through tuition. Staffing increase, we mentioned on the last slide, we would have about $400,000 that we would anticipate there would be an increased cost in staffing with this model. And then in terms of income, we would expect to get a state reimbursement that Treasurer Cusick has shared would be about $600,000 that we currently do not receive because we charge tuition for our kindergarten model. So the total incurred year-over-year cost for moving to this model would be about $1.2 million. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and pause and open up the floor to any questions that board members might have.
Thanks, Rob. Would anyone like to start us off? Maybe I'll tee up one question that I think we all have, and then by all means we can jump in. Please stay at the podium because this is not specifically it's obviously related to this, but it's more of a question for TJ. We've had discussions about wanting to stay off of the ballot strive to stay off the ballot longer than what we have promised to our community to stretch this most recent levy, and just want to ask the obvious question of, do we feel this allows us that we would still be within our budget to do this?
We do. I think as we talk about, so let me back up. So, when we revise our 5-year forecast twice a year, we brought this conversation up to our committees, our community finance committees last year at this time as a concept, ran the numbers for that. And we do think that we will still be able to stay off the ballot and have a reasonable levy in 2028. So we'll go through updates to that forecast in a few weeks. And as I think you'll see, there's not much variation in that. So we've modeled that in like we predicted last spring, and we're sort of where we thought we'd be. Okay. So I do think that we will be able to stay off the ballot until 2028 with a reasonable levy at that time.
Wonderful. Then I will just say thank you, Rob. I'm very excited. This aligns with a number of our board goals. Definitely making, all things public education most accessible to all of our families. And Jennifer, I think you were going to jump in with the first round of questions, so please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Rob, for all this. It was very helpful, and thank you to you and Trent for answering questions over the weekend and today that we had. So I'm going to ask some questions that I pretty much know the answer to, but the public may still have the questions. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to go through the presentation, but you talk about the push-in program, and sometimes we hear flyaway program. I believe they're the same thing.
Yeah, correct. So a number of years ago in Worthington, we ran a similar model. We called it at that time the flyaway model. So that's the model where students that were enrolled in half day participate in the full day classroom and then leave midway through. We just changed that terminology this time around.
Okay, so currently our students that do leave the middle of the day, they're missing lunch and recess because they're leaving before that starts. What curriculum are they using?
Yeah, so this year we worked with teachers over the summer in those classrooms and really worked on crafting an instructional day that allowed all of the students in the room exposure to all parts of the curriculum. So students that are joining for just half the day are still getting exposure to all of that curriculum. And then in the afternoon when those students are gone, it allows time for students to really apply that instructional knowledge that they learned. It leaves time for teachers to work with students on a one-on-one basis or in a small group setting, and really time for kids to apply what they've learned in the morning time. So all students this year have had exposure to that curriculum. So that was something we wanted to make sure that we provided for all of our kids in the room. Looking long term, if we were to move to this model and move to a fully all-day model, I'm not so sure that it would benefit us to try and live in both worlds like that, though, because it does have an impact on how you set up that instructional day, and it does impact the flow of when you might put things in front of students in terms of how you introduce things with their learning or the order of the day that you move through what you're instructing students on.
Okay, very helpful. You talked about space availability. There's no issues at any schools if we increase the number of
No,
all-day?
we believe with our current enrollment that we would be have plenty of space to institute this.
Okay, and then as far as the budget considerations, I know we had more retirements than expected. We can still think about delaying the levy, but I'm still wondering if there's other ways, and this really is probably not for you, but for Trent and TJ, but stay there. Other things that we're looking at as far as efficiencies. And for example, in the high schools, we used to have really clear-cut class size numbers, and we used to combine Thomas and Kilborn classes if they weren't large enough. And I think a lot of that has kind of been eroded and gone away. And I think we're probably doing things differently now. Instead of combining the two schools, we may combine levels, but I'm just wondering if there are any looking at efficiency considerations before we decide to spend another $1.2 million.
Yeah, Jennifer, I think that's a great question. Especially if the board sanctions it, are committed to making this levy last for 6 years, right? And so, when we were on the ballot in 2022, we promised the community it would last for 4 years. We'd be back in 2026. We now believe that we can stretch those dollars farther, that would be positive for our community. We can stay off for 6 years. We also believe that we can add what we think is pretty critical programming for our kids. That said, it will require us to constantly look for efficiencies, right? I mean, that's something that we know. Now, we don't have identified efficiencies right now. As our schools have grown over the last decade, you're right, some of the things that we used to do, we've seen growth, that's shifted the equation a little bit. But we do know that, looking at student schedules, looking at how we fill vacancies when vacancies occur, is something that we would commit to continuing to do. I think our community's always expected that, and it is a way that we can stretch those tax dollars. But I also believe we can do this and maintain our current service levels for kids. I don't think there's any reduction in service that needs to happen. It's just as we look forward, and especially if growth levels off, right? We'll see where our growth is, but we've seen a little less growth than what was projected over the last 2 years. When you just look at, the housing market in Worthington and the lack of available housing, it's possible that our growth levels off for a while before it eventually grows as Central Ohio grows. that provides us the ability to kind of tighten what were some of those growth projections. So I think we can, it's a long answer to say we're committed to those efficiencies, but I think we can do both.
I'll just add, so the 600,000 in state revenue is a bit of a question mark, right? So that is what we would get this year under the current formula. But we are on a working formula now, and the big unknown in the next biennium is will the inputs be adjusted for inflation? How much will property reevaluation impact the formula? So, and that won't just impact kindergarten, that'll impact all 10,000 plus kids. But so that there could be more, that could be less. It's a guess. And the 400,000 is probably, in my opinion, a conservative estimate. If we needed all 4.5 people, we could hopefully see some efficiencies there. I don't know. So that's a bit of a working number, if you will, but we'll see.
Always with the
Right.
state budget, right? And something that we didn't really discuss with that number, and a lot of community members may not realize, right now, we only get for our kindergarten students a half a day of reimbursement. Even those that are going full-time because they're paying. But once it would be free to everybody, we get a full day for
Correct.
each and every
So-
kindergartner, correct?
Correct. So currently, districts that charge tuition are only funded for the half-day program. So how we came up with the 600,000 is we roughly have 750 to 800 kindergarten students that we're only being funded half for, 375 to 400. So if we took another 400 students, because we get fully funded for them times $1,500 a kid, the question is, what is that $1,500 state share going to be?
Right.
But
Okay.
that is correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob. That's all I have for now. Appreciate your time and pleased with the program that we can hopefully offer.
Thank you.
Stephanie, you want to go ahead?
I had similar questions to Jennifer, so I won't take up too much time. I do think kind of along the lines of not just looking for efficiencies, but thinking about this in the context of we're talking about this because our needs of our students have evolved, right? We've seen this huge shift. And so it would stand to reason as well that we will see shifts in other places. So that is, maybe that is along the same line as efficiencies, but I know that we will, but I want to evaluate those sorts of things, and that's certainly we can't always add. At some point, stuff has to fall off, right? But that said, I don't even want to think about, I'm looking at the slide about the all-day kindergarten revenue, and that caught me because I don't want to think of that as revenue that we're losing because we are a public institution, and I fundamentally don't think we should be asking people to pay for school. So from my standpoint, that's it's not really revenue that we're losing because probably shouldn't have been getting it in the first place. So I think this is a great idea. I'm glad that we can make it work. I'm glad that we can make it work and stay off the ballot. That's incredibly important to all of us, I know. And I think the other piece here that I don't want to get lost in this also is compliance with House Bill 33, because that's going to be a huge part of everybody's jobs going forward. And I think is important for us to set all of our kids up for success, right? To allow them to have all of those fundamentals of reading from the time they are in kindergarten all the way through. And it shouldn't be something that only the kids that are able to pay for or qualify for free and reduced or have access to. So thanks, Rob, for this. This is fantastic. It answered a whole lot of questions, and that's all I have.
Thanks, Stephanie. Amber, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thank you, Rob, for
You're
all of that
welcome.
information and for like Jennifer said, answering some of the questions we already had over the weekend. One of the questions that I had was, as we talk about expanding our class sizes and bringing in everybody into the kindergarten program, I guess I was just a little concerned about the stress that might put on the teachers. What kind of resources are we giving them? What does this transition look like as we go to these?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I don't want to speak in absolutes here because enrollment changes from year to year. But when we think about class size, we would not expect really to see an increase in class size for our full-day classrooms under this model. If anything, we might see a slight decrease because what we'd be doing is taking, if you recall back to the slide with the enrollment numbers from the start of the year, we have a lot of sections of half-day that have very low enrollment. So that's going to help balance out some of those full-day classrooms. So we wouldn't expect to see our classrooms increase in terms of the number of students that are sitting in them. So I wouldn't expect a large adjustment in terms of what a kindergarten classroom looks like or feels like or the amount of bodies that are in the room.
Okay.
That's a good question.
Yes, and would there be just absolutely no half-day options now, or?
That's what our recommendation would be, is to follow suit in what other districts around us have done. So like I mentioned, we have had the opportunity to talk to a number of other districts, and they do share that they do not have requests for half-day kindergarten, and that families have adapted and want to be part of that full day setting. So I think it'd be really difficult to try and live with 1 foot in and 1 foot out of that. So if we transition to the model, our recommendation would be to move to a true all-day model. And of course, if we did have a family that wanted to come just part-time, we would absolutely welcome them into our classrooms and make them feel part of that room. But I don't know that we would want to adjust our instructional model in those classrooms.
And as far as a timeline for this, we're looking at maybe possibly next school year?
Yes, well, so our hope would be that the board approves this with the approval of the 5-year forecast. So when the board looks at the 5-year forecast on November 25th, our hope would be that this is modeled into that, so from a financial standpoint, and that signals approval. And we would begin registration for kindergarten next year on January 1st.
Those are all the questions I had. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks.
Thanks. Kelly?
Thank you, Rob, DJ, Trent. This is helpful information just as we are making that decision about the 5-year forecast in November. My colleagues, of course, asked a lot of the similar questions, which I appreciate that we're kind of on that same wavelength. I do think we need to be mindful, just adding this, when I look at all of the big picture together and I look at this 32% of our students in kindergarten are on free and reduced lunch, and like to your point, Stephanie, shifts, and Jennifer, efficiencies, just like looking at making sure that we're mindful about what our priorities are going forward, however, whatever we decide in November, and implementing this, because I think it's a great, just wonderful thing to be able to offer. Because I agree that I don't think that, families should have to pay for public education. But so just being mindful of that, and that 30, I don't know, it just really struck me that there are those families that are free and reduced, but then there are always, I think of the families on the bubble that don't technically qualify for that. And just, I think as our community shifts, as our students shift, and just being mindful about what student support and needs is going to look like going forward, and just keeping that in mind as we make these kind of decisions. Just about class size, I thank you for answering that you don't think that the class size and themselves are going to increase. But what I'm wondering is, are students maybe not going to be able to stay at their home schools? Or do you think that there's enough room in each school to run full-day kindergarten and have students, and I know that's hard to determine because you don't know the numbers, right? So in theory, do you think that for the most part, families will be able to keep their students at their home schools? That was a big, like when we talked about this half-day, lower numbers, that was a big part of the conversation is, families wanting to keep their students at their home school. So do you?
Yeah, that's another great question. So Kelly's alluding to last spring when we were really trying to determine our path with low enrollment and half-day kindergarten. One of our priorities was keeping kids at home school. So Kelly, I don't think that I don't think it would cause any wave of students not being at their home school. So we would really approach enrollment just as we have in past years. So Could there ever be a case where a student isn't at their home school for kindergarten? There could be. So as we get into late summer months, sometimes we do have sections that fill up, and for a year or half a year, we have students that do need to overflow to other schools. But I don't think a shift to all-day kindergarten would be an impetus for more students being in that situation than would be typical.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing about the difference between the curriculum and what students receive half day versus full day. And so that's why I think it's a great benefit for students to be there all day so that they can be exposed to the curriculum and apply it and get intervention. So I love that. So thank you for adding that information. I think that's all the questions that I have.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you again, Rob and Trent and TJ.
Thanks, Kelly. You answered one of my follow-up questions as a result of my peers. I don't know if you want to answer this or if Kim would want to chime in and answer this. We've talked about how fantastic this will be to remove the financial barrier and provide access. We've talked about aligning with being able to meet the requirements of House Bill 33. Does someone want to talk just a little bit about the benefits of early intervention and the fact that these kiddos having access to that, and having the time in the day, right? I think would be helpful for our community to hear that as well.
Absolutely, Nikki. So, that's a really important driving factor. So when you look at our half-day program, it really is a short time frame. So they're just over 2 hours of instructional time. And so when you consider that you're introducing English language arts, math, science, social studies, and all the other things that happen in our kindergarten classroom, that is such a short period of time. So we really do, from being educators, we do feel like the increased time in the classroom benefits students, especially students that might need an extra scoop of instruction, extra time with teachers, or to be able to access some other form of intervention. So, Nikki, that's a super important point when we think about special education. So special education services are driven by student need and what's on a child's IEP, which we will always work to provide. What this does for students that might come out of the classroom for IEP services, it provides them more time with the general education curriculum and content in the classroom setting as well. So I really think all students, no matter what your background is, no matter what the level that you're performing at in school, all of our kids really benefit from more time in our classrooms and more time with our teachers.
Excellent.
Did I answer your question in that
most
regard?
definitely did. Thank you.
Nikki, can I piggyback on that?
Yeah,
real quick?
absolutely.
I
Please.
think the other piece to that, which we're just kind of all talking around this, not around it, just talking, is that it allows teachers an opportunity to identify the need for that early intervention, right? Where you might not, as you're going through this whirlwind of not quite 3 hours of everything.
100%. Yep. Not only getting the services, but identifying the need for the service. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other follow-up questions? Thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks
you.
to you and to TJ and Dr. Bowers, all of you for putting this together, and very exciting opportunity here. All right, this brings us to reports and announcements. Dr. Bowers.
Thank you. So I would be remiss if I don't just start by thanking Mr. Messenheimer. You can tell that Rob's worked really hard on this. His level of preparedness and competence shows. So we are excited about the future of kindergarten in Worthington. This is something that many of us at this table and really in our school district have wanted to do for many years. So it's an exciting opportunity, and I appreciate Rob's work in bringing this forward for us. So our mission in Worthington Schools is to empower a community of learners who will change the world. We work through that through our 4 vision statements. Our first vision statements, we will engage each student with diverse opportunities to maximize every student's potential. And one of those diverse opportunities is this weekend, our girls water polo teams at both Worthington Kilbourne and Thomas Worthington competed in the state water polo tournament. Worthington Kilbourne finished 3rd, and Thomas Worthington finished as state champions after beating Upper Arlington 7-6 in the final game. We'll honor the Thomas team at our November 13th board meeting. But in Worthington, we pride ourselves in offering a wide range of curricular and co-curricular options for our students. Water polo is just one example. Our second vision statements will provide a safe environment where every student can grow intellectually, emotionally, socially, and physically. Since the beginning of the school year, we've been piloting the Centegix Crisis Alert System at Brookside, Worthington Estates, Perry, Phoenix, and Worthington Academy. At the conclusion of the first quarter of this school year, we surveyed our staff members at those schools. They reported that the system was one they valued and appreciated. Our plan will be to install the system at all Worthington schools by the start of next school year. So we're going to move forward with that. Our third vision statements will provide consistent communication and promote dialogue with our community. This week, our district administration and our school board are engaged in student listening sessions at Worthington Kilbourne, Thomas Worthington, and Linworth. For each session, a diverse group of students is selected to share their experiences with our team. We believe that listening to student voice is essential in a large public school district because it fosters a sense of belonging, it empowers students to feel valued and engaged in their education. It provides insights into their needs and challenges, and helps us create responsive policies and programs. Finally, our hope is that this process encourages accountability and transparency, and it builds trust between students and the district while promoting the culture of respect and continuous improvement in Worthington that we expect. So we'll be at Thomas Worthington a couple times, I think twice this week, and then Linworth next week. Is that right? I should have checked.
I think it's next week.
Okay, either way,
Yeah.
we've been at Worthington Kilbourne twice, we're going to Thomas twice, and Linworth, and we're excited. We're great students to talk to.
Oh, no, it is this week because we're in Halloween costumes. Sorry, it is this week. You're
Yeah,
right.
you guys on Thursday and
Yes.
Wednesday we're at Thomas. Okay.
Yes,
quick
it is this week.
Quick question about
Yeah.
that.
Fire away.
Is the entrance to Thomas now the main front door? Is that where visitors check in?
It is the main front door, so you can
Okay.
park in that front parking lot.
Oh, I'm gonna be working
or
at the
you can-
Mac. I'm
Or you can
walking
parallel
over.
park, okay,
Yeah.
or you can walk to the Mac. Just don't park in the Mac parking lot unless you're.
I got my permit.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, don't anybody park there without a permit.
They frown upon that, especially if you're a student at the high school. Okay, so our final vision statements will be responsible and transparent with our community resources. Just a reminder that school will be closed next Tuesday, not tomorrow, next Tuesday, November 5th for Election Day. This day allows voting for major elections to occur without students in school for safety reasons, and it becomes a professional learning day for our teaching administrative staff members. So all staff members will be engaged in learning with the major focus on what are the common executive function skill deficits that we see in our students, and what can we do to support student growth. So we'll utilize the time provided by our community with fidelity, and just a reminder that there is no school on Election Day, November 5th. President Hudson, that's my report for the night.
Thank you, Dr. Bowers. Any questions or follow-up comments? Okay, excellent. Mr. Cusick, would you like to share the treasurer's report?
Yes, thank you. First up, as most of the board is aware, Randy Banks and I engaged Carrie Maulard of Maulard Consulting last fall and winter to produce a readiness and feasibility report regarding fundraising and naming rights campaign. Ultimately, we decided to put that on hold as that involves significant infrastructure, and we were awaiting the Education Foundation to regroup, and because that would be a lot of alumni reach out. But this week, we signed a smaller engagement with Maulard Group specifically to look at our assets as our high schools come online and other assets that could be named, provide us financially what the market is for those rights. This isn't saying that we should name everything for compensation, as our policy is well written and allows for two different routes of naming things for recognition versus financial. But this report hopefully will just provide us some market valuations to use as a reference as we finalize our high school projects. It's expected to be completed sometime around March, so we'll have that back. We were also notified this week that our popular annual financial report, our PAFR for last year, again received the highest award from the GFOA. And so our audit for 23-24 is hopefully wrapping up in a few weeks. Once that is done, we'll be able to produce our new PAFR, which should be distributed in December, early January. But we're happy we got that award once again. And that's just some background on tonight's agenda items. The first item from our office is to participate in META, the Metropolitan Education Council's request for proposal for electric service beginning July 1. Similar to the natural gas one we passed a few weeks ago, our current five-year electric agreement expires in June, and so this request for proposal will allow us to aggregate and purchase electric for another 5 years with close to 130 other school districts around the state. So it's very advantageous for us. The bulk purchasing we get has saved us a tremendous amount of money over the last 5 years, and we look forward to getting the results of that RFP and continuing in that process. Other item tonight is to continue to utilize Rich Gillis Law Group to represent the district in valuation disputes with the County Board of Revisions. So as a reminder, we do not challenge owner-occupied residential properties. Most of their work revolves around defending us against owner-initiated commercial complaints for decreased valuation. And as I sent that data to the board, the valuation predicted is well worth the investment that we pay the Rich Gillis Group. So that is what that item is intended to do for next year. That is all.
Excellent, thank you. Any follow-up questions or comments? All right, we'll move on to board committee reports and announcements. Kelly, do you want to start us off there? Thanks.
Let's see. My little report. I attended the OSBA Black Caucus meeting. We had our monthly meeting. So that group is still in discussions about amplifying the fact that we need donations to the Leo Lucas Scholarship Fund. That window is open anytime. And there was supposed to be a video, or is supposed to be a video, I haven't looked yet, to see on OSBA's website, giving more information about that scholarship and, you know, what it goes to and how you can donate. So as appropriate, make sure that you share that is a fund that could use some love. Still gathering ideas for Black History Month. That information will be also housed on OSBA's website. So different districts are contributing information. We're sending it to the president of the Black Caucus, just on ideas of how to celebrate Black history in your district. And so you can look for that information coming on their website. And then Dr. McFarland also shared that the Tuesday of Capitol Conference is School Spirit Wear Day. So they're encouraging all attendees to wear their spirit wear and show your school pride. So that's Tuesday of the conference. I did attend the student feedback session, one of them at Kilbourne. Stephanie and I attended that. There were a couple themes. Jeff did a great job facilitating the conversation and having small conversations. So I got to talk to a student. We each got to pair off, and that was great. So there were some themes. So we talked about cell phones, which you know is the hot topic. And so there was a lot of feedback about why students still need access to their phones when they're at school, because they need to text their friend, make sure they have lunch plans, which I think is so sweet, right? Like, I want to text my friends for lunch plans too. So, but it's always good to hear their reasons why, right? Why they feel like they need access. It's not as though they're saying, I should be able to text while my teacher is teaching. I don't think that that's what they're saying. But if there's a pause, if there's a break at the end, or if there's time in the hallway and lunch, to be able to at least have access to their phones. What I did find interesting was that there was a different variation about what the practice is in that same building. So in that same building, that one student said this is the practice, and another student voiced a different practice. So this is the practice for Kilbourne and Thomas this year is new, so I get it. So making sure we have better communication or different communication. I don't know. Talk about communication a lot too, which was another theme. School news is preferred, email is not. And IG is where it is. Okay, so that is but students talked about having one place, one location to find all the information. Like you have your different groups, like you have band, or you have theater, or you have your sports teams, and they all know all of the different things about their environment. But where is a place where all students can find out about all those things, like the themes of the football games? That's important information. I find that information on Twitter, but they want to know where they can find it all together. So that communication was a big part of that. Just what's going on in the buildings, like just understanding what's happening. Construction was a different theme. Overall, it was okay. They're doing fine in Kilbourne. It's a little bit annoying when the construction happens in the hallway or when they're have to go around different things or when they're hammering next to them and they're trying to learn. So that was just bothersome. There weren't any like high issues going on with that. Let's see. We talked about DEI and students being very grateful that there are different clubs within the schools. And that they want to discuss more current events as it relates to history. That's one thing that I heard, which I appreciated that. Safety always comes up, and every time that safety comes up in one of those, it's always the bathrooms. It's always the bathrooms. So this is like things that will be fixed during the construction. So like leaking and water and things like that and congregating in the bathroom. So but it's always good to sit down with them, and it's always good to talk to them and get information about what's going on in those buildings. So appreciate that. I go on November 7th. I can't remember if I go to Academy or Linworth, but it's one of those two on the 7th. Thank you. Awesome. So I'm going to Linworth. So key communicators, I attended the external and internal key communicators. This time they had external key communicators at noon, and it was a good turnout. Like there were at least 10 to 12 people there, which was a good turnout for a noon time. So kudos to the communication team for trying something different, which I feel like worked out really well. Angie's not here for me to brag on her, but she talked about Portrait of a Learner a little bit, and she went to the Portrait of a Learner conference. Am I saying that right? And at the conference, the CEO of Patel talked about how different Worthington does it in a great way and how we have become a model in that other districts don't have, like for our portrait, we have the portrait, but you have it at every level. So you have it at the elementary level, the middle school level, which was already there, and then the high school level. And other districts aren't doing that. And so people were asking Angie questions and she was facilitating conversation. So I told her next year she needs to be the keynote speaker and like how shine were for her portrait. So we talked about that a little bit, talked about kindergarten. We talked about district communication. Again, communication is a thing. Like there are just so many avenues in which we communicate with community members and families and students and teachers and all that. So I think that always comes up, and I think that's just going to be an ongoing, how best do you do it? And I think everyone's doing it the best they can. So, but it's also good to communicate back with us how the communication is landing with you. How many times can you say communication? Okay. We talked about the pool, and people had questions about that and the school stands. Dr. Bowers talked about that. Talked about some restroom usage practices in the building, and one parent gave feedback regarding the new reading curriculum. So that was good to be able to hear how it's landing with their student. So that was good for key communicators. Internal key communicators, pretty much a lot of the same information that were shared. We talked about strategics, and some teachers that were there gave a little bit of feedback about how that's working in their building. So that was good to hear too. Okay. And then lastly, I went to my first water polo game, you guys. So I've been to been to a lot of games, football games, basketball games. I've never been to a water polo game. I was like, I can't hear. The enthusiasm in that pool, you've been there, right? You go to, so it was really exciting to see. So we went to the Kilbourne match, and it's fast paced. I was tired just watching them. You have next fall, sign up, go. And it's an enthusiastic sport. Just wonderful. So just very, great congratulations to the Cardinals for winning state and for the Wolves for winning third. Just those girls work hard. And so it was really great to see. And UA has a nice pool. Ours will be nice too. So it was good to experience that. But that's all I have.
Thanks, Kelly. Amber, would you like to go next?
I do not have much to report because I've crammed all of my professional development for the entire year into the last 2 weeks. So I was in Anaheim, California for the PRSA conference where I did get some information I feel like I could share with Angie about AI. So I thought I would share that, and I have a couple things to talk to you about too, Vicki. But So that was last week, and then the week before, or the week after that was DC. So, but I did get in the internal communicators, and Kelly went through everything. The only thing that that you didn't mention that I was going to say was we did talk about all-day kindergarten. And so that group is, educators, they're teachers. And one of them, I don't remember which one, just said that we've been wanting this to happen a long time. And so I just feel like that was kind of the vibe in the room. Everybody was really thrilled with what Trent had to say, it seemed like. And I think that was encouraging for the decision, that we had before us to sort of hear what that group was thinking about. But yeah, I'm going to a student listening session with Jennifer Wednesday at Thomas, so I will be going in the front door just like you, so thank you for asking that. And TAG is, right, their TAC? Yes, TAC is this week too. So that's all I have.
Excellent. Thank you. Stephanie, would you like to go next?
Sure. Kelly did a much better job than I would have of recounting the student feedback session, so thank you. I don't have anything to add, but yes. And Jennifer and I had CLC last week? 2 weeks ago? At some point.
Probably last week.
Since the last meeting. So I'll cover a few things and then toss it over to you, but that was my first kind of formal meeting. I think the only other one that I had been to was right before the state of the schools last year. So, and that was a little more informal, but this was really fun for me to get to kind of see the parents. Some of them were new, some of them have been on before, engage and thinking about what they wanted to talk about over the next year at the meetings. So they had an opportunity. If you know me, I love a good sticky pad on the wall. I'm all about it. And sticky notes on the sticky pad are even better. So they got up and did that and talked about things that they've been wondering about or would like to delve into, or things that they heard from their schools or their peers. But a lot of parents that are teachers in other districts, so that will be interesting for them to bring kind of that insight. So that was really interesting, and it was a lot of things that you would expect. I know Angie aggregated all of that, so I won't get into too many details. But a lot of science of reading, a lot of things about just kind of how we're implementing testing and all that kind of stuff. So really important topics. The thing that I was really geeked out about is something that we're just starting in the district. And this kind of goes back to this whole kind of communication theme that we've talked about within the schools and within the district that we all struggle with, that I know you guys struggle with. How do we get the information out to parents and community members and things like that, which is not an easy task. But we talked about there's something called the Positive Parenting Program, PPP, which is not something that I'm familiar with. But I am so excited about bringing programs like this to the district so that we can engage with the community, because I think we know just generally that having community-based programs that align with school-based programs for parents they drive success for kids astronomically. And so kind of destigmatizing this idea around parenting positively has worked wonders in other communities. There's tons of research about it. And so I'm super excited to learn more. We already had some educators that were certified in this, and so we're driving to get more as well. And even though I didn't know it was happening, and a lot of people in the room didn't know it was happening, the sessions were still filling up really quickly. So, so I'm really excited to learn more about that. And a lot of that is Nathan's influence, so that's amazing to have him in that role, and that's exciting as well. So I will stop there and let you fill in the rest, but that was the only other thing that I did since the last meeting.
Okay, yeah, I was there too, and I can't think of anything else to fill in except we really appreciate Nathan. He was there at the meeting. I think the parents appreciated him being there and talking a little bit about his role, but the fact that he's bringing a positive parenting session to our parents on an all-day Saturday to talk about Fearless PPP for adolescents. So it's really about dealing with teenagers for this first session, and it filled up right away, and there's a wait list. So I'm hoping that he and the people he's trained are able to add more. So that was great. Yeah, the having parents that are teachers as part of the team is great, and Angie did a great job of getting ideas from our parents of what they want to hear about. So I'm excited for the next meeting to see what she decides on as being one of the most important things. So that was a great meeting. I'm excited to go to Thomas on Wednesday and hear from the students because that'll be my first student meeting. And, congratulations to Kim and the special ed staff for getting, I'm going to call it an excellent rating, the highest rating from the Department of Ed on our special ed program. So that was good news. So congratulations. And that's it for me.
Excellent, thank you. I attended a student session at Worthington Kilbourne. We had similar themes that Kelly talked about. I'll just touch on a couple of them. First of all, with regards to cell phones, I thought it was great that the students talked about the fact that they understood the need for restrictions. So I felt like, for the most part, they said the restrictions made sense. They echoed similar comments that you shared, Kelly, regarding, if they finished up their work in a class or they had a free period, those are the times when they want access, and felt like that was a reasonable amount of access. We talked about challenging coursework, and it was great that the students were aware of College Credit Plus courses, AP courses. They spoke very highly of the Teaching and Learning Center at Worthington Kilbourne High School and accessing it. I thought it was really interesting. I don't remember who asked it. Might have been Eric who asked the follow-up question, like, how did they know about it? And it was absolutely word of mouth. Like, it was your friend telling you about this is a good resource and go and use it. Same feedback on construction, like, for the most part, okay, still, as any construction would be, like, a hassle at times, but nothing drastic there. The other thing that I thought was incredibly positive was they talked about the fact that, and Dr. Bowers, you touched on this earlier, we pride ourselves in Worthington in offering a wide variety of opportunities for our students. And the fact that things that future plans that some of the students had, like there was one individual who really wants to be a computer scientist, said it absolutely was sparked by a class that student was able to attend. And so that wide variety, I think, just the conversation really underscored the value of that wide variety and having access to different opportunities, because you don't really know what's going to spark an interest sometimes until you get exposed to it. So that was positive to hear that there were some future plans in the works as a result of access that they had in our curriculum. And then I get to join Stephanie. Are we going in costume on Thursday to Thomas? I say that
You are invited to wear a costume, Nikki.
Okay, I say that a little selfishly because
She's into this costume.
I love Halloween, so I will show up in costume.
I will wear something
Okay,
from the
very
costume bin.
All right, very good. So that'll make it even more fun. And we won't be the only ones, because the teachers are having a competition. So even if students don't, and it's part of the theme of the week, so students should be dressing up as well. So it's not like just two board members are going to walk in dressed
I don't
in
mind
costume.
standing out. This is just effort.
Okay. All right, that brings us to approval of minutes. Mr. Cusick.
She showed me a picture of her costume earlier.
I'm not wearing that one. That's a blow-up one. It's huge. It would be fun, but yeah, I don't know. It'd be interesting. Yes.
Thank you. I would like to recommend that the Board of Education approve the minutes from the October 14th meeting as presented in enclosure E1, please.
So moved.
Second.
May I ask a question about this?
Mm-hmm.
Really, really interesting
Just
part
abstain.
of the agenda.
Yeah.
Do I abstain, even
Mhm.
though I've read it and I've watched the video and I feel
Oh.
like I have a idea for the minutes? And
I am not an attorney. I believe OSBA answers this by saying you do not legally have to abstain, but I think it's common practice to
Okay.
abstain.
just checking. That's fine.
Any questions or comments regarding the minutes? Would you please call for the vote, Mr. Cusick?
Mrs. Epling Skinner,
I will abstain.
Ms. Harless,
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson,
Yes.
Mrs. Best,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Motion carries. I love that Amber was first.
Thank you. I would like to recommend that the Board of Education authorize Meta to issue a request for proposal for the purchase of electric service and to purchase that service from the lowest and best bidder per enclosure F1.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments regarding the recommendation? Would you please call for the vote?
Ms. Harless?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you. I would like to recommend that the Board of Education authorize the law firm of Rich and Gillis Law Group to represent the district during calendar year 2025 in matters related to property valuation and taxation, including but not limited to filing complaints and counter complaints with the Board of Revision.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments regarding the recommendation? Seeing none, would you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner?
Yes.
Ms. Harless?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. Dr. Bowers.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda. The consent agenda is items G2 through G5. G2 through G5, please.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, would you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner?
Yes.
Ms. Harless?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes. Motion carries.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve item H1. H1 is the acceptance of donations that are listed on your agenda. H1, please.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, would you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner?
Yes.
Ms. Harless?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve item H2. Item H2 is the resolution confirming the impracticality of busing to a newly enrolled student, as declared by myself, the superintendent, to and from Columbus Humanities of Arts and Technology Academy. Item H2, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments regarding the recommendation? Would you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Epling Skinner?
Yes.
Ms. Harless?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you, Dr. Bowers. That brings us to requests, questions, concerns for the board. Anything from anyone in this section? Yes, go ahead.
Two things.
Please.
First, I will not be wearing a costume to the finance meeting on Thursday, so you know. I love Halloween, though. Don't misunderstand. I will not be coming in costume. Capital Conference is before we have our next meeting. I'm just curious if anyone else is going.
I'm going.
Okay, you're going. Are you?
I'm going for part of it. I am curious, Trent, do we have any administrators that are doing any sessions?
great
Because I
question.
always like to plan my days around that if they are.
That's good. I don't know the answer to that, but I will find out for you and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
I am bummed, but I have to travel for work, so I will not be there.
Understood. Yeah, happens.
I'd much rather be
Like,
there.
Who to look for? I mean, it's a big place, so.
I'll definitely be there on Sunday, and
Okay.
I'm not sure which other day.
Okay.
Okay,
Kind of waiting.
okay.
All right. I was just curious. That was it.
Excellent, thank you. That brings us to our calendar. So as you mentioned, our next board meeting is after the conference, which means it is on a Wednesday. So I want to make sure our community understands that. Our next meeting is November 13th, which is a Wednesday at 6:30. And we will be discussing the presentation is using data to drive instructional decisions and also release time for religious instruction policy. That will be followed by our 5-year forecast on November 25th, and then special education audit on December 9th. Dr. Bowers mentioned it earlier, but I will just reiterate PSA. The election day is Tuesday, November 5th, so please make sure to use your voice and vote. Any questions or comments regarding the calendar? Nothing? Okay. So I think we can then entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Would you please call for the vote?
Ms. Harless?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thanks for joining us this evening, everyone.